All right, so a few weeks ago, I made a video highlighting a whole bunch of interesting stories at Valley Cemetery in Manchester, New Hampshire. And whenever I make a video like that, I spend a whole ton of time on findagrave.com, which is a sort of cataloging website for cemeteries all across the world. And while I was scrolling through the Valley Cemetery burial entries on Find a Grave, I came across this page. William Henry Carney, who died way back in July of 1907. Carney's page is rather intriguing. See, while most of the other burial pages for Valley Cemetery include pictures of the gravestone, Carney's page just has a copy of his death certificate and that's it. Probably because nobody could actually find his headstone in the cemetery to take a picture of. And what's more, a few years ago, someone left a comment on Carney's page saying that they checked in with the cemetery staff and heard that Carney isn't actually buried in Valley Cemetery at all. So if Find a Grave is wrong and William Carney isn't buried at Valley Cemetery, then where is he? Well, that is exactly what we're going to try and find out today. It's time for another video where we solve mysteries and take requests on findagrave.com. The last time I made a video like this, you guys seemed to really enjoy it, so I got another 5 or 6 graves that we're going to be investigating today. Starting, of course, with Mr. Carney. So obviously, the first question that we got to ask here is, why was Mr. Carney listed as a Valley Cemetery burial in the first place? Like, where did that information come from if there's seemingly no visible headstone in the cemetery? Well, the answer is in the death certificate that we talked about earlier. Right there, plain as day, it says that Mr. Carney was interred in Valley Cemetery on July 18th of 1907, just a few days after he died. And for the most part, this is completely acceptable evidence for determining where someone is buried. Headstones are often destroyed or never even put up at all, so you can usually at least softly trust this kind of formal documentation, even if there's no visible burial marker in the cemetery. So, of course, with that said, what happened here? If the death certificate says that Carney was buried in Valley Cemetery, then how come the cemetery staff is now saying that he's not there? Well, I always like to start with old newspapers when I'm doing investigations like this, so I started looking through the local newspaper archives, and right away I found a very illuminating article. On August 14th of 1907, the New Hampshire Farmer published a story about some controversy surrounding the burial of William Carney. See, Mr. Carney was actually a black man who was married to a white woman. Carney's wife died a few years before Carney did and was buried in her family's plot at Valley Cemetery, and the plan was supposed to be that when Carney passed away, he would join her and also be buried in that plot. But then, when Carney did eventually die, the undertaker claimed that there was no room for Carney's body next to his wife, and so he was instead buried in nearby Pine Grove Cemetery, a separate burial ground that's also in Manchester, New Hampshire. Unsurprisingly, as you might guess, there was a lot of talk at the time that this whole thing was racially motivated, but the relatives of Mr. Carney's wife maintained that those accusations were untrue. Who can say? But regardless of the motivation, this is kind of a sad turn of events, isn't it? Like, according to the article, the cemetery officials were at least going to try and bury Carney next to an old friend of his who is also buried in Pine Grove. But apparently they couldn't find the friend's gravestone in the cemetery, so they just buried Carney all alone in the public ground. Not by his wife, not by his friend, just all by himself. But the silver lining here is at least now we know where to look for William Carney, right? Pine Grove Cemetery in Manchester, New Hampshire. Only one problem though. Pine Grove is absolutely humongous, well over 40,000 burials. It would take forever to find William Carney just by walking aimlessly around the cemetery and hoping that he still has a visible headstone. And so I thought it would be a good idea to try and find the cemetery's burial records, because a lot of these large and historic cemeteries keep pretty reliable documentation of their burial history. So with any luck, maybe we can find some information that might help determine exactly where in the cemetery Carney is buried, like maybe a grave plot number or something like that. And wouldn't you know it, I was able to find a nice, well-preserved burial record from Pine Grove Cemetery stating plain as day that William Carney was buried in grave plot number 7777. And it also says that William Carney was removed from the cemetery in June of 1908, about 10 months after he was buried. This is where things are really getting interesting. Another lead to chase down. Like, when I got to this point myself, when I was first doing this research, I was totally taken off guard. I 100% thought that the end of the trail was going to be Pine Grove Cemetery, and I was totally ready to submit some edits to find a grave and try and get Carney relisted as a Pine Grove burial. So thank God that I actually read that whole card and saw the removal at the bottom there, because I very well could have just gone, oh, 7777, let's drive up to Pine Grove and walk around and hope we can find Carney. Unfortunately though, as exciting as this is, the card doesn't actually say where in Boston Carney's body was moved to. But that's okay, because I think I got a way around that. Almost definitely, Carney was moved by his family, right? Like, why else would someone pay all that money to have the body disinterred from New Hampshire and brought down to Boston? Carney probably had some family members who were buried in the Boston area, and his body was moved to be buried with them. So I took another look at Carney's death certificate, and I saw that both Carney's mother and father are listed on the record. I couldn't find any information on his dad, Moses Carney, but I was able to find a death certificate for his mother, Mary Carney, or Mary Cothriel, if you want to use her maiden name. According to the death certificate, Mary died on December 7th of 1907 and was buried in Mount Hope Cemetery just outside of Boston. Still though, this on its own is far from proof that William Carney himself was also buried in Mount Hope Cemetery. We got a little more digging to do before we can come to that kind of conclusion. And so, I started looking around for burial records at Mount Hope, and I learned that the City of Boston Archives Department apparently has microfilm copies of all of the burial records at Mount Hope from between 1852 and 1980. And so, the next step, of course, was to send an email to the records department and ask if these microfilm slides were publicly accessible. And I have to admit that I was definitely expecting to be told either no or yes, but you're going to have to come to Boston and look through the records yourself. But instead, the very nice archivist who I emailed just went to the microfilm copies themselves and looked for a card with the name William Carney for me, and then they emailed me back with the card attached, just like that. And so now I am proud to present to you William H. Carney's burial record at Mount Hope Cemetery. Thank you to that archivist who sent this to me, because this is a fantastic find. William Carney was interred in Mount Hope Cemetery in June of 1908. There it is in black and white, and also there's a removal field at the bottom of the card that is totally blank. So it seems to me like we finally found where William H. Carney is lying at rest. The only slight downer here is the fact that Carney almost definitely doesn't have a visible headstone at the cemetery, because Mount Hope is an extremely well-documented and historic cemetery on Find a Grave. So if there was a headstone there that said William Carney on it, then almost definitely someone would have already taken a picture and uploaded it to the site. But of course, even still, I had to go out there and check for myself anyway. So I took note of the grave number that's listed on Carney's burial record, and I used a map of Mount Hope to figure out exactly where that burial would be, and almost for sure I can tell you that William H. Carney's remains are somewhere under the ground in this general area. I read every single headstone in the section of the map that includes Carney's burial number, and I came up with nothing. So I think we can conclude that Carney was either buried without a headstone or his headstone was destroyed sometime in the last 118 years. I did find some other grave plots with little stone markers displaying grave numbers that are very close to Carney's number of 3293. So we can assume that Carney is at least somewhat in the neighborhood of those plots, but I think that's just about as close as we can get. But I'd still call this a success, because almost definitely we found where William H. Carney is buried, at least down to an area that's a few dozen feet wide, which is a big improvement over having him listed at Valley Cemetery over 100 miles away. It's sad that Carney doesn't appear to have a headstone, and it's especially sad that he wasn't buried next to his wife up in New Hampshire. But if it's any consolation, his mom, Mary Carney, is also buried under the exact same grave number. So even without a headstone and even without his wife, at least William is probably resting forever with his mom nearby. And that was our first mystery. Pretty cool, right? But really, we're just getting started because I got plenty more Find a Grave stories to unravel here. Let's jump over to some live footage and get going on the next investigation. All right, here we are live in Mountain View Cemetery in Shrewsbury, Massachusetts. And we're here today to do something very special. See, in addition to Find a Grave's very helpful cataloging system, people can also submit requests on certain graves. Like, for example, if you live in like Florida and you find out that you got a relative who's buried in Oregon, you don't want to drive all the way out there to get a photo of their gravestone. So maybe you can put in a request on Find a Grave and somebody who lives near the cemetery can go out and get the photo for you. Today, we are looking for somebody named Lavina Newton, who has a request put on their headstone. Looking at the photo that's already attached to Lavina's grave entry here, it looks like the headstone is knocked over, sitting on the ground. And the request says this: "Can anyone please check to see if this gravestone has been fixed? I hired a man to fix it, but now I can't get a hold of him. So I'm wondering if he passed and if he never got the chance to fix it." So that's what we're gonna do right now, is see if we can find this headstone and see if it got fixed. Let's go. So first step in finding this stone is going to the right area, because even though this is a gigantic cemetery with well over 10,000 burials, cemeteries are usually separated out pretty well by era. And since Newton died in 1891, I think we're in right about the area we gotta be right here. I'm seeing a lot of other 19th century burials. And also, according to Find a Grave, Lavina Newton has a husband named Martin Newton, and on his catalog entry, you can see that his gravestone is still standing. And if you look real close at the background of that picture, you can see another grave marker that's pretty big that says "Drink Wine" on it. So if we can find the Drink Wine headstone, then I think we're gonna be in good shape to find the Newton headstones. Where are you, Newton? Oh, look what I just spotted. The Drink Wine headstone. So the Newtons, let's see if I'm walking backwards at this angle here. One of these. Let's see. Oh my God, look. There she is. Wow, look at that. That's her. You can even see the indentation there where the headstone used to be toppled over. So that's actually pretty heartwarming, I gotta say, that this headstone is actually fixed and I get to upload this photo and hopefully make somebody's day. That's why it's so much fun to do these Find a Grave requests, is sometimes you get to feel like you're actually doing something pretty cool. Interesting thing here though, looking at this, look at that. Lavina's name is spelled with an O according to the headstone. It's Lavina, Lovina, instead of Lavina with an A. Because right now the catalog says Loveina with an A. So we get to upload a picture of a fixed headstone, and also we get to correct this slight error on the catalog. That's pretty cool. Loveina Arnold, widow of Lowell Pike, wife of Martin Newton. Beautiful. And thank you, Drink Wine. You were a big help today. Appreciate it. All right, now we are here in very beautiful Park Avenue Cemetery in Holden, Massachusetts. Somebody put in a request in this cemetery for Nancy W. Kilburn, who lived to be 102 years old and died in 1898. That is quite the age for somebody in the 19th century. Pretty cool. We're gonna see if we can find her here. The Find a Grave page also has got a picture of Nancy also to help motivate us to find out where she's laying at rest. Lots of ice here. Oh, that's good water. Oh, oh, oh. All right, well, I kind of feel like I got insanely lucky on this one. I basically just walked around the cemetery for like 3 minutes, stepped on some ice, and here we have the Kilburns. Over here is William Kilburn, who died in 1862. Looks like a Civil War veteran. Yeah, killed in the Battle of Williamsburg, 1862. And here's his wife, who lived to be 102 years old, Nancy Kilburn. Beautiful. All right, here's a pretty interesting one. We are now in Pine Ridge Cemetery in Hancock, New Hampshire, and I'd like to show you the gravestone of David Moores, who died way back in September of 1841. And the reason I want to show you this stone is because of the inscription along the bottom. Just listen to this. Here peacefully lies the once happy father, the joy of his beloved wife and daughter. But whilst in health the woodsman axe he sped, God aimed the tree that crushed him dead. Pretty morbid little inscription there, right? This stone is relatively kinda sorta halfway famous because of this inscription. Only one problem though. On Find a Grave, it's actually written down wrong. Somebody transcribed a mistake. On Find a Grave, it says God aimed the tree and crushed him dead. But as you can clearly see on the headstone, it's God aimed the tree that crushed him dead. That, see? So there you go. I drove all the way out here to fix that one word that literally nobody would ever notice. And if I wasn't making this video, nobody would ever notice that I fixed it either. But there you go. That's what we're all about. That's what we do at findagrave.com, baby. Yeah. All right, kind of a weird situation. It's windy and cold, and I'm walking down this road in a state park in Winchendon, Massachusetts that's closed for the winter. The road was barricaded off, so I couldn't drive down here. So I just been walking, and I thought I was gonna get to walk on this nice paved road here, but now I gotta go for like a mile on this pure ice road. But I guess there's a cemetery down there somewhere, so you better get going. Well, here we are. I made it to the cemetery. I'm looking for Fred Sweeney and Benjamin Bridge. All right, well, now I'm leaving the cemetery because I couldn't find either one of Fred Sweeney or Benjamin Bridge. All right, I am wearing my hunter safety gear because we're in the Arcadia management area in Exeter, Rhode Island, and we're looking for a very special cemetery called the Lillibridge Lot. And this is a special case because on Find a Grave, there are 0 pictures whatsoever associated with this cemetery. I checked on this other website, the Rhode Island Cemetery Database, and they said that this lot was discovered by somebody in 1994. I have to assume that at least one other person has gone to this cemetery in the last 30 years, but apparently nobody actually went there to take any photos. So we're gonna go ahead and fix that. There's one open request at this cemetery too, so I guess that's gonna be the main thing we're looking for. But considering there's literally no photos whatsoever of this cemetery, we're gonna fill out this whole page today, hopefully. Because this cemetery, looking at the map, doesn't really look like it's next to any well-defined trails. I found this random little road here that's kind of halfway going in the direction of the cemetery, at least the direction of the GPS coordinates that I have for the cemetery. So we're gonna see how far we can follow this. Very good chance we might have to bushwhack. Hopefully we'll find the cemetery at all. Here we go. The Find a Grave page does say that there should be at least a couple of visible headstones, so considering it's winter time, it shouldn't be all that hard to spot those stones through the trees here without their leaves. And also from the map, the cemetery should only be like less than a quarter mile from the road, so if we do have to bushwhack, it shouldn't be that big of a deal. I'm feeling pretty optimistic we can find this one. All right, I've only been following this trail for a few minutes and we're already turning pretty far away from the direction of the cemetery, so I think it's time to brave the thicket a little. It looks like on the map that it shouldn't be much further than a couple hundred feet through the trees here, so let's go see if we can spot it. Where are ya, Lillibridge lot? Where are you? Brush is starting to get kind of thick, but we should be quite close to the cemetery now. Yeah, here's check that out. You can see it, but here's an old stone wall right here. A lot of these old cemeteries that are just kind of out in the middle of nowhere in the woods were like private cemeteries for a single family or like a small neighborhood of farms, something like that. And then as the farms fell into disrepair and got abandoned and the area was allowed to turn back into wilderness, the leftover remnants of the farm, like these walls and the cemetery, just kind of got swallowed up by the woods. So this is a good sign. Oh, my hat. Oh no, I look like a deer. I lost my hunter hat. Wow, this is some very thick brush we're pushing through here. Really hoping my GPS coordinates were right on this one. Come on, little headstone, where are you at? Oh, I see a much bigger stone wall. That's a really good sign. I have no idea if the cemetery is enclosed or not, but that could be the wall of the cemetery right there. Let's see. Hey, there's my old friend. Rhode Island Historic Cemetery sign. This is one of the coolest things that an organization, a historic organization, has ever done, in my opinion. The vast majority of Rhode Island's historic cemeteries have these signs in the neighborhood of the cemetery that were put up by the Rhode Island Historical Cemetery Commission. Pretty cool, right? So somebody came out here, unless there's like a trail nearby that I missed, somebody came out here and smashed through the brush and put up this sign. So now we just got to find the graves, because they should be within 50 feet or so of this sign. Oh, there's one. Yeah. There we go. Look at that. Here's a few. Yeah, there we go. See? There's one. There's one. There's another one right there. Here's another one. And this one's tipped over. As you can see, the cemetery is insanely overgrown. It's entirely been reclaimed by the woods. And it's pretty big too, so I have to imagine there were some unmarked burials in here. It's hard to tell from the camera, but this cemetery is actually fully enclosed by this wall here still. It's maybe like, I don't know, 40 feet by 40 feet, something like that. And here's the old entrance right there. It's now blocked by a big tree growing right in the way, just to give you an idea of how long this cemetery's been inactive. Okay, check this out. This is pretty cool. This is some New England woods detective work right here. This is an old stone wall right here that's in really bad shape, really falling apart. We're following with the camera, bad shape, broken to pieces, and then boom, all of a sudden it's in great shape when it meets the cemetery perimeter. Look at that. So I have to imagine that maybe the need for this wall diminished long before this cemetery stopped being maintained by somebody. So this wall kind of got left by the wayside to deteriorate, and somebody 100 years ago or whatever kept this one in good shape. That's pretty cool. The wall's actually in great shape around the entire cemetery. I've been looking around the perimeter of the cemetery too, and I don't see any trails or anything. So this one is fairly isolated out in the woods. You'd probably never find it on accident. So because that sign is here, I'm certainly not the first person to come here in 30 years, but I can still be the first person to update that Find a Grave page. All right, here's one I barely noticed. It's mostly buried. Okay, I can feel indentations. Let's see. Yes, it does have initials. What is that? ML, I think? Let's see. Yeah, I think that's ML. Is that ML? Oh no, I think it's LL. Yes, LL. Perfect. You see that? LL. Nice. Oh, here's another one. Looks like another initial headstone. W. I think that's another L, which makes sense because this is the Lillibridge lot. So everybody buried here is probably from that family. Yep, that's another L. WL. Check it out. This is what's known as a field stone. I've talked about these before on this channel many times, but this is a burial marker with no inscription on it. It's just a stone that somebody found on their land and plopped it in the ground on top of their buried loved one, and that's their marker. So no idea who's buried here, but we love and respect them all the same. Here's a very mossy object. Let's see. This feels uneven, so at best I think this is a field stone. Probably not a marker with actual inscription on it. Hard to tell though. It's totally swallowed up by the moss. Alright, well I think we got all that we can out of the Lillibridge lot, so let's just get a quick picture of the sign for completion's sake, and that's that.